welcome back to Party Astrology. I'm Nina.
I'm Shaina.
And this is the second video in our Lilith series, since we're doing Lilith through the signs and Lilith through the houses. And our first Lilith through the houses portion of the series, this is Lilith in the first house. You read the title, you get it, you got it, so let's get into it.
We got a shit ton of stuff down below if you want to check it out, but you know about this, so let's just hop right in.
If you don't know anything about Lilith, definitely you're going to want to watch our introductory video to this series, which is all about Lilith, all of the Liliths, what she means, her whole story. But Lilith in the first house. So we mentioned quite a bit that Lilith is, not the most prominent thing in your chart. It's not a personal planet, it's not even a generational planet, it's not even a physical object in the sky when we're talking about Black Moon Lilith. But if it's in the first house, it's going to present a lot more prominently in your chart by virtue of it being in an angular house. And the first house has everything to do with your sense of identity. So to have Lilith in the first house, Lilith is therefore informing your sense of identity. And we'll talk a little bit about now how that might manifest itself for you. In my experience, I found that since Lilith, as part of her story is such an outcast, is such an outsider, and is so shunned from Eden, everything like that, that with Lilith in the first house, you identify yourself and potentially take some sort of pride in being somewhat of a contrarian, going against the grain of what people told you was appropriate behavior. There's almost like this rebel essence in you, specifically when it comes to women and owning your sexuality, because that's a big theme in Lilith. When it comes to just like independence and confidence over things that societally are usually deemed taboo, like sex and sexual independence and sexual freedom and sexual expression.
With having a first house Lilith, that can be a very intimidating thing for a lot of other people to encounter, because Lilith is that strong, feminine, dark, independent thing in us, that's going to do what it wants. So even when you're young and you display that, people can very quickly be put off by you. People can reject you, be intimidated. You kind of experience rejection when asserting yourself. Like, it might be that you don't mean to, but you assert yourself so confidently and without these preconceived things put on it. You don't give a shit if you're a female and you're being sexual with a Lilith in the first house. You are going to do that because that's who you are. And you can encounter some kind of friction from other people because of how freely you express it. What can come from that is even, again, kind of how I mentioned with Lilith and Aries, like a stronger sense of self because of that. As you get older, you become more and more kind of fuck you towards all those people that are telling you that you can't do this, that you can't do that you can't do here or there, that you're going to not care and you're going to embody all those things anyways. And you can be a very, very polarizing presence. It's kind of like when we talk about, Scorpio rising or Pluto in the first house, Lilith does that similar thing of people cannot like you just because they don't like you. And a lot of times, probably females, especially insecure females, are really not going to like you, and it can feel like for no reason. But at the other flip of the coin, you can also be such a symbol for female independence, or just independence in general. And if you do get to the point where you're big enough, people will look up to you for the fact that you unabashedly express yourself, and that could be a thing that you're loved for as well, as much as you can also be hated for it.
Yeah, Lilith loves to say fuck you. Lilith likes to go against the grain and be a sort of rebel in some ways, or just like do opposite of what she's told. And so I've seen often that with people who have Lilith in the first house, what happens is that they receive these narratives of how they should behave, especially when it comes to things surrounding their body and their sexual expression, and they take a lot of joy and pride in going directly against that and portraying themselves in an overtly confident way and saying fuck you through their identity, saying, fuck you, I'm going to do the opposite of what you've tried to instill in me. And it's not by your actions necessarily, it's not by what you do for a job or what you do in your life, it is the first house, and it's through your identity, potentially even through just the way that you dress and do makeup and physically express yourself, from tattoos, from whatever. There's just like, it's your identity, and you throw in all of this contrarianness. You just adopt this rebel identity, especially when it comes to your sexuality or your darker side. Lilith in the first house also, Lilith is obsession. So you can get obsessed with making sure that you come across in this particular way. You get obsessed with this identity that you've cultivated for yourself, and obsessed with other people perceiving you in a certain way, even if it's not a positive way, because like Lilith loves the haters. Maybe you get obsessed with the haters, you get obsessed with the hate, and you get obsessed with the love.
This is the embodiment of like haters make me famous kind of vibe. These people can also not only become like, just in general, you're a very obsessive person, but you become obsessed with your physical appearance as well. And you do have a very strong, dark sexual energy that you kind of spend your life trying to harness in the right way. These people can be pinned as crazy or bossy, or just can be seen as this hypersexual person. And people can get obsessed with you. And that's kind of what you want, though. You want people to be obsessed with you. You like that. You feed off of that. Because you're trying to be so physically attractive and this alluring person. And like Nina was saying, the hate fuels you as well. If somebody's talking about you, at least, what is it? All press is good press. That kind of thing. I wrote down some people that have Lilith in their first house. I mentioned in the last video Michael Jackson. He has Lilith in Aries and Lilith in the first house. So yeah. But in a good way, like Malala is somebody with Lilith in the first house, because she's very much like, I'm standing up for what I'm standing up for, and I don't really give a shit. RuPaul has Lilith in the first house. Jack Black. I mentioned this Tina Fey, and she literally has a book called Bossy Pants, and I just said that they can be seen as bossy. Megan Thee Stallion, she definitely gives, like, she has the ultimate Lilith body, basically. Marilyn Monroe, that is such a Lilith in the first house person, because they're all these impersonators of her, but with her Neptune in the first and her Lilith in the first, nobody can give that alluring and naturally sexual like presence and vibe that she gives off. Like, yeah, there are people that look like her, but there aren't people that have that energy that she has, which is why everybody always tries to emulate it. Shakira, because her hips don't lie. Natalie Portman, when she was young, she was in the Leon the Professional movie, which is a pretty sexualized role for a child. And Billie Eilish, I feel like she definitely gives a very like Lilith in the first house vibe, in that very like masculine Aries kind of like, I'm gonna dress how I want to dress kind of way. I don't really know much about her, but I know she has some song like about she's a bad guy. I don't know.
Lilith in the first house is so easy to spot and so easy to understand, because it's literally people just like portraying Lilith energy. Billie Eilish is a good example because she's hot and popping, and I feel like even if you don't know anything about celebrities, you like know her look, you know her vibe, and it's just like, yeah, I'm the bad guy. I am portraying this like dark persona. We talk a bit about Lilith and Aries being a lot about being self-interested and whatnot, but Lilith in the first house, more than anything, is being obsessed with yourself, being obsessed with that image, because the first house is not your sense of self. It's not who you are at your core. It's about other people's perception of you. Lilith in the first house can make you obsessed with portraying something rather than being something, and be more obsessed with how other people see you than obsessed with yourself and like cultivating yourself. I have Lilith in Virgo, so I'm obsessed with making myself the best person possible, right? But Lilith in the first house is just about being obsessed with making a presence, making your presence known, making yourself stand out and be contrarian, be a rebel, ruffle people's feathers, and portray this kind of confidence, even if it is not rooted in any actual true sense of confidence that you might have on the inside.
Yeah, a lot of times it is just like an empty projection. This is definitely kind of like Lilith and Aries. Narcissistic, a pretty big ego, have trouble putting yourself in others' shoes, seeing situations from a side that isn't your own. It's just hard to distract these people from themselves and how people see them. And maybe these are even people that get told a lot about themselves, if that makes sense. Because like, I think of as like 7th house energy, you don't ever really get validated or told who you are. I feel like 1st house energy, especially 1st house Lilith, people may tell you who you are a lot, or are just very verbal about what they think of you. Because you're constantly being told like who you are and people are constantly talking about you from a young age, you're used to that narrative and you're never used to stepping outside of that. You know what I mean? Like sometimes these are people that may talk a lot about sex or may talk a big game or may talk a lot of stuff, but they might not actually be doing it. They're just trying to project that they are, you know?
Yeah, and there might even be that pressure that you have to make sure that you're projecting this sexual energy, this sexual feminine independence and power, and on the inside it can just like not really resonate, and you might have values that are in conflict with this Lilith identity that you have because of Lilith in the 1st house, and that can be really difficult because Lilith in the 1st house, it's a prominent Lilith, and suddenly you're kind of forced to be in this position where you're making Lilith a priority in your life when maybe you shouldn't. Maybe that's not what the rest of your chart wants. For some people, making Lilith a priority in their life can be very empowering, but some people, you know, have Venus in the 7th house and then Lilith in the 1st house, and all they want is a partner in love, but what they feel like they need to portray is someone who's like, I don't even care. I'm so like, this is Samantha. This is Samantha in Sex and the City. Lilith in the 1st house.
I do want to say some positives about this placement. Obviously, Lilith, it can easily go more negative. But I think that the great thing about this is that you really project this, like, don't walk all over me energy. You're not going to get taken advantage of because you're not going to let that happen. You project a lot of confidence. This is like a major girl boss position, you know? This is somebody who's really able to manage themselves and take care of themselves and doesn't need anybody else and isn't dependent on anybody else. Of course, this can go the wrong way and, again, be hyper independent and like, you know, really hate everyone and not want anybody in your life. But in a positive way, it can just be that you are autonomous and independent enough that wherever you put yourself, you will stand up for yourself and you will stay true to yourself. And you can be in a group of friends, but still have your own individual identity within that. And I think that can be a really great thing. Even people that I know in my day-to-day life that I think of with Lilith in the 1st house, they're just really seductive and they can really like take people away in their trance. They're kind of can be very crazy and hypersexual dominant people, and that's why some people do get envious and jealous of them. But also I think that we also look up to them for that very same reason.
The real positive of Lilith in the 1st house is their ability to deal with hate. I just finished listening to the book, The Obstacle is the Way, and I think that Lilith in the 1st house really gets that mindset of, you know, hate is the obstacle, but it's also their way. That hate and that criticism and that people telling them not to do anything is just going to fuel their fire even more in terms of their self-confidence. The more people tell them that they're wrong, the more empowered they feel in their position to be right. And obviously, that can be detrimental because too much ego and too much, you know, self-absorption and feeling that like no matter what kind of criticism you get, you always feel like you're right can be bad. But it can also be good in certain situations where you're really able to stand up for what you believe in and stand up for yourself no matter how much opposition you encounter. I think that it's important to remember also that Lilith is a lot about sacrifice. And with Lilith in the 1st house, the sacrifices that you end up making come from one of two things, or maybe two of two things. There is the sacrifice that you make by virtue of your obsession with yourself and your obsession with your identity. And the sacrifices that can come about with that are a lack of, seventh house things, a lack of real human connection, a lack of a connection to your authenticity, a lack of being able to follow through with different values because of this concentration that you have of portraying this Lilith image almost. And, sacrifices having to do with like action versus projection, tangible things versus what you're showing off. And this is call out time. Lilith in the first house is most likely to just like, because we're in a crazy time in history. Lots of Black Lives Matter stuff all around, and it's a very important movement. And people with Lilith in the first house are the most likely to make sure that they are talking about these things publicly without, reading the books and educating themselves and making actual practical steps to be more anti-racist, or even, be able to acknowledge their subtle white supremacist behaviors or thought patterns or whatnot, because what they're most focused on is, making sure that everybody knows that they support BLM and that they are this social justice warrior who is a rebel and whatnot.
Yeah, it's that like shallow image thing that Lilith in the first house completely can fall into, for sure. And also, I think especially like Black Lives Matter and movements like that is like such a good example because it's like against the curve.
Something I want to put as a little warning is that Lilith in the first house also can attract, unfortunately, a lot of bad people. Like, can attract pervs and creepers. It can invite, unfortunately, sometimes a lot of unwanted sexual attention or sexual energy being put on you. And with Lilith at a young age, it can be detrimental because you're just sexualized from a young age and you're used to being that way. And I know even Megan Thee Stallion talked about that in just an interview about how, like, since a young age, whenever she'd walk by, people always would assume she's older. People would always sexualize her even when she was like 13. And that kind of stuff can be really hard to deal with. And it can be that double-edged sword of like, you want to be this hypersexual person, you feel comfortable putting that out there, but it's hard when it attracts these kind of people. Of course, Lilith in the first house likes attracting people in general. These are definitely the kind of people that they can have a stalker that kind of ruins their life or, really invades their personal space and their privacy, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Lilith is all about the sacrifices that we make to fulfill this desire. If your desire is to portray your sexuality and to own this identity of someone who is Lilith, then you're gonna get some demons in your life. You're gonna get some creeps. I mean, it's almost like as simple as, Lilith in the first house most likely to potentially like be in sex work or even just like have OnlyFans, stuff like that. That is something that can be totally, absolutely empowering for a Lilith in the first house, but it's not always a bed of sunshine and rainbows. You have to make a lot of sacrifices in terms of like needing to deal with pervs, needing to deal with people who don't respect your boundaries, trying to cross them, not acknowledging you as a human, stuff like that.
A person that I know with Lilith in the first house, specifically in Leo, is literally a dominatrix. That's their job. They have Mars in the second house, Lilith and Leo in the first.
Lilith in the first house people were never deemed like too innocent for anything or too innocent for any situation. So you can be exposed to like crazy things and like people can be really, really, really honest with you for like no reason, but it's just because you give that vibe of like, I've seen some shit, I've done some shit, I've been interested in some shit, like nothing will faze me because I project the darkest of life. So people can really tell you some crazy shit and you can be put in these really weird situations, and especially at a young age. Something that I do want to say as like a disclaimer is that if you're watching this video and you're a Lilith in the first house and you're like, I don't think I'm sexy, like I am this awkward, like I am just like a mom type, like my answer to that is Tina Fey. Tina Fey is a Leo Lilith in the first house. Her whole fucking show 30 Rock is just about how she's ugly and she's not as hot as the other girls. But in reality, when you go on like Pornhub or whatever, like she is like the hottest soccer mom basically. You can become the hottest blank, even though she doesn't see herself as that way, she very much is like hypersexualized on the internet still.
And Lilith doesn't always have to do with like sexuality first and foremost. Like Tina Fey is her identity is very much having to do with her feminism and her girl power.
Yeah, sometimes this can be also like the black sheep of the family. You can feel that way. That is our Lilith in the first house video. Stay tuned because next up we've got Lilith in Taurus. I hope you guys enjoyed.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure that you let us know what you thought of it, any insights that you might have gotten from it. Are you a Lilith in the first house? Is your ex, is your most sworn enemy? I'm sure we've got lots of jealous girls watching who are like, that bitch Karen, she has this placement. This is why she's like the worst person ever.
Yeah, and why you also secretly lust to be her.
Yeah. And as always, lots of links in the description, including for readings on partytrickastrology.com/shop. To keep up with us more, follow us on our personal channels and our Instagrams. Shaina also has a Twitch stream thing situation, Depop shop, so much stuff. Check it out in the description. So many links, so little time.
Yeah, so thanks for watching, you guys. Bye.
Bye.